which is here already. Gift Thompson Alabo. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name correctly. It's from ZLight Innovation Hub Labs, and it's going to be bringing the exposure and the lecture to us. So let's sit tight and listen. And then if you have questions, let's kindly note them down after the session. We're going to ask them. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I didn't quite get the name before. What was the name again?
Faith.
Faith. Okay.
Yes, Faith.
Thank you. So, all right. So I'm going to be sharing my screen. I actually spent a lot of time and a lot of work to create a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to share my screen now. I hope that's allowed.
Yes, it's allowed. Please go on. Let's go on.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
And you can see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay. All right, so okay, so basically this is it. So this is what I'll be talking about: building a robust API with Laravel. So hope you can hear me loud and clear so that I can go ahead.
Yes.
And you can see my screen and it's clear. Okay,
thank
you very much.
So good.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about myself a little before I start. So I am a senior PHP developer at ZLight Innovations Lab. So I've been coding for over 5 years now. Started from structural programming with PHP. And then I moved into object-oriented PHP. What I always tell my students is that don't just dive into object-oriented programming. Try to get some knowledge, do some structural or procedural programming, know what it's all about. Because most of the time they say, oh, object-oriented, it's hard, it's difficult, and sometimes they want to give up. I say it's because you just dived early into object-oriented programming. So I try to tell them, do a little bit of procedural, get a feel of that spaghetti code that people hate so much, have a feel of it, know what it feels like. Then when you're done with that, can go into object-oriented, learn about abstraction or the core functionalities of object-oriented programming, and then pick a framework. Initially, I wasn't doing Laravel. I was doing CodeIgniter. So, can you hear me, Faith?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So initially, it wasn't Laravel from the start. It was CodeIgniter. I think back then, CodeIgniter was more popular than Laravel. So I did CodeIgniter. I enjoyed it. Then Laravel came up. It was the rave of the moment. I looked at it and it really caught my eyes. I was fascinated by it. So that was when I now dived into Laravel. It has some super features. One feature that I liked so much was the eloquence, the way it handled models. It was fascinating and it was fast, smooth, clean. Though it's an opinionated framework, it's like based on general concepts or ideas of what people feel is the best solution. That's what they give to you to use. But I think it's a great framework. So I'm just going into the slide. So I prepared a slide here, so I'll walk you through the slide. So this is the part one of the slide. So the first question is, what is Laravel? So like I said earlier, Laravel is a PHP framework it was developed with the developer productivity in mind. So when you're doing your own design yourself, you do a lot of things like validation, authentication, and all of that. But with Laravel, it handles most of it for you. It's like it's written with your productivity. They want you to be fast. So it was written and maintained by Taylor Otwell. He's the guy. So whenever you go to LaraCon, whenever we are holding LaraCon, I think we are going to be holding one this month. He's normally the guy that comes and talk about new features, tells you about what's going on with Laravel. They have lots of rich features too. We have Forge. I think there's Forge. There's Vite now. Lots of cool features, and he's basically the guy that talks about them. So talking about Laravel, the question would pop up. So Laravel is not the only PHP framework, but why Laravel? Why should we go with Laravel? So I think this basically answers the question. Laravel is a progressive framework. And what do I mean by that? Is Laravel was built for everyone and it grows with you. So even if you're a newbie to Laravel, you can easily use it. Even if you're a senior developer like myself, you can easily use it. It has job queues, it has notifiers, it has everything that you need as a senior developer. Another thing that makes Laravel standard is that it's scalable. So you cannot talk about building a robust framework without talking about scalability. Scalability is a very, very key and important feature of Laravel. So what makes it scalable? So PHP itself now is scalable, especially this PHP version 8. It's scalable, it's fast. It handles a lot of things that people used to say, oh, it's because of this thing, I would rather go with a JavaScript framework. PHP does that. Now you even have asynchronous in PHP. So one reason why Laravel is scalable from this second, you can see that Laravel's built-in support for fast distributed cache systems like Redis. So Redis is a cache system. So we know the cache memory, it makes processing fast, so very super fast. And Laravel supports it. It also supports horizontal scaling with Laravel Breeze. So Laravel Breeze makes horizontal scaling as simple and as stress-free as possible. And finally, it is a community framework. Like React, Laravel is a community framework. So you have lots of people that make use of Laravel. I even belong to a community called Laralag. It's a group of people that code in Laravel and stay in Lagos. We have meetups and everything. So there are lots of opportunities in Laravel. There are lots of communities. There are lots of communities that back up Laravel. So you don't get stuck. If you have an issue and you belong to any community that does Laravel, the support is there. The support is massive. So it's not like you're doing this thing and you're doing it alone. The community is there. I don't even think that there are some languages that don't have that much community, but Laravel has a huge community and it has a huge support. So when they ask you the question, why should I build my APIs with Laravel? I think these three things are key features to it. So going to the main matter that we have today, APIs, building robust APIs with Laravel. So I wrote something down here. I think I got it from Artexsoft. So they said an API is a set of programming code that enables data transmission between one software product and another. And it also contains the terms of the data exchange. I'm also going to be making this PowerPoint presentation available so that you can go through it later. I have some resources that are attached at the end of it that are being referenced, like this Artexsoft. You can look at it later. So they said an API is a set of programming code that enables data transmission between one software product and another. So it's more or less like a means of communication between two processes. So there's this image below. It describes the flow that an API does. So we have the web browser, which most people call the client. It makes a request to the internet. The internet calls your API or your web server, and it connects to your database. And your database, in turn, makes a response, and that response is given back to the client or the web browser. So basically, it's a two-way thing. You make a request and you get a response. And that is what consists of an API. It's an application programming interface. So you make requests and you get a response. That's what interfaces do. When you make requests, you're supposed to get a response. It's like you're talking to somebody, you ask them something and they respond to you. That's what the API does. So API specifications or protocols. So there are different specifications or protocols that APIs follow. So basically, there are other. The API specifications are quite different from API types. If you want to talk about API types, we have the private, we have the public, and we have the partner API, but the specifications are quite different. So when you hear RESTful API, that's not talking about an API type. It's talking about an API specification, the architecture, like the process that the API conforms to. So there are different architectures or specifications. And basically, I will look at this 4 common ones. The first one is the SOAP architecture. So one key feature about the SOAP architecture is XML. So XML is the extensive markup language. So it conforms to that standard. The standard for SOAP is the XML. So I wrote something here. It's the APIs that comply with the principles of SOAP. They enable XML messaging between systems through HTTP, which is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or simple mail transfer protocol for transferring mail. So basically, it uses the XML format. So when you send data, the response that you get is an XML. So the next one is GraphQL. I think GraphQL is supported by Facebook. They are the ones pushing GraphQL. So one key thing about GraphQL is like you have these microservices where you have an API for different things. It's like a query language. So there's an API for different things. So there's an API for one particular aspect and another API for another aspect. So what I wrote here is that GraphQL is a query language for APIs. It allows the client to detail the exact data that it needs, and it simplifies data aggregation from multiple sources. So the user can use one API call to request all the data that it needs. So I make one request and all the data that I need is just there. So that's one advantage of GraphQL. So it's fast, it's very fast because you don't have to be making multiple calls. Just make one call. And because of the way it is structured, it's like doing an SQL query. You query and you get what you want. So if you want a particular set of data, you query for it and all of it is given to you. The next one is the representational state transfer, which is the one that I will be focusing today. So RESTful systems, they support messaging in different formats, such as plain text, HTML, YAML, XML, and JSON. So one key difference between the REST API and the SOAP API is that SOAP only allows XML, while REST allows different formats. But one of the major formats that is used is the JSON, which is the JavaScript object notation. So it's one key for REST APIs. They make use of JSON and they make use of XML or YAML, but most people just tend to use JSON because it's the most popular. Then finally, the gRPC protocol. I think this one is backed up by Google. This is the one that Google likes. Google always like to do their own thing. So this is their own protocol. So it is serialized data structure. So for each data that you're sending, you have to make sure that it's serialized and it conforms to their data structure. So basically, I will just be focusing on the REST API, which is the representational state transfer. So let me go to the next one. So why are APIs beneficial for businesses? So why, as a business owner, why would I want to use an API? Why don't I just go with a monolithic aspect or any other aspect? Why should I go with using API? So number one is that it gives a top quality experience. So what I wrote here was that APIs aid in enriching app functionality, thus helping to improve an application's user experience. So APIs overall, they aid user experience. So they make it more friendly for the user. That's why people love using APIs, due to abstraction. APIs abstract data. The user doesn't have to see so much, but he gets to do so much. So with API, there's a high level of abstraction. You call the API you need and you get the data you need. You don't need to know what's happening on the ground. So high level of abstraction, great user experience. Number 2 is innovative technologies. With the invention of application architecture such as the IoT, the Internet of Things, cloud services, and artificial intelligence, APIs have become integral to any app development. So there's almost every company has an API. You want to do machine learning, there's an API for it. You want to do Internet of Things, there are API for it. There are even APIs that assist with embedded systems. So basically, you don't even need to stress yourself writing your own API, because there's an API for everything. So you just basically call an API and it gives you what you need. So sometimes based on the user requirements or the user request, you have to actually do it. Or there's basically lots of APIs. People basically write APIs and sell them. It's like a business on its own. When you talk about NFTs and everything, you have that market where people just create APIs and they sell it. Another thing is reduced expenses and time to market. For companies, one significant benefit of an API-driven approach happens to be the reduced time for development, which helps to speed up the time for marketing in the long run. Comprehending that most app functionalities exist elsewhere, as I had just said, it will be possible for the developers to use APIs to integrate. So if you want to make use of payments, you don't really have to write your own code. You call either the Paystack API or Flutterwave API or Stripe or whichever one you are most familiar with, you just make use of it. There are a lot of reusable APIs. So this just reduces expense and increases the time to market. It makes everything fast. So building RESTful API with Laravel. So now the question arises, should I use Laravel or Lumen? That's a very good question. Sometimes it's a debate that comes up in our group. Some people are Laravel driven, others are Lumen driven. So before I answer this question, I know this is supposed to be about Laravel, but there's also Lumen. And if you look at it, if you go to documentation, this is the definition of Lumen. Say Lumen is the stunningly fast PHP micro framework by Laravel. So should I use Laravel or should I use Lumen? Basically, Lumen is like a micro framework. It's like a smaller version of Laravel, but it is built to only support APIs and all of that. So you want to decide, should I use Laravel or should I use Lumen? If you go to the Lumen documentation, the answer is there. It says, in the years since releasing Lumen, PHP has made a variety of wonderful performance improvements. For this reason, along with the availability of Laravel Octane, we no longer recommend that you begin new projects with Lumen. Instead, we recommend you always begin new projects with Laravel. So that basically answers the question. Always use Laravel. Though Lumen is fast, it's a micro framework built by Laravel, they now urge you to use Laravel instead of Lumen due to its speed and everything. So basically, that's the whole idea. So should you use Laravel or should you use Lumen? Since they say Lumen is a fast micro framework of Laravel, why don't I just go with Lumen? Basically, most times I still use Lumen because it's fast, it's smaller. I use it, but if you go to the official documentation, they say use Laravel. So it now comes down to personal choice. It's all up to you, whether you decide to use Lumen or you decide to use Laravel, it's up to you. But basically, even when I use Laravel, I tend to strip it down to the bare minimum. I remove most of the functionalities that I don't need. I remove the resources folder containing the JavaScript, the views and all of that, all of those things that I know that I won't be needed, I just strip them down and basically go straight to the point and keep only those things that are related to building my API. And that's in its essence makes it as fast as Lumen itself. So let's dive in to the main thing for today. So how do I build a RESTful API with Laravel? So the first thing is that you should use the repository pattern. So there are different patterns when you're building APIs with Laravel. One of the patterns is called the repository pattern. So in the repository pattern, each entity has a corresponding repository containing the helper functions to interact with the database. A key benefit of the repository pattern is that it allows us to use the principle of dependency inversion. Basically, it just talks about abstractions or concretions. So with repository pattern, there is high level of abstraction. And the key reason why I use it is because it makes our code more robust. You know, the topic here is building robust APIs with Laravel. So the repository pattern makes your API more robust. So I'll read that again. This makes our code more robust to changes such as if a decision was made later on to switch to a data sort that isn't supported by Eloquent. We know that Eloquent is the ORM of Laravel. It's the main part that handles the data models. So by using repository pattern, you just map each entity to each database, and it just makes your life simpler and faster. Another thing is that it also helps with keeping the code organized and avoiding duplication. So when you have the repository pattern, everything is more or less reusable. You don't have to be rewriting code. You just follow the dry principle. You write it once, you use it as many times as possible. You don't have to be redoing it over and over. With the repository pattern, you have different repository, you have different services, you have different contracts, and you just call them over and over again. You don't have to rewrite them. So one way to make sure that your Laravel API is robust is to make sure you use the repository pattern. So somebody might want to ask, if I'm not going with the repository pattern, what other pattern there? Okay, you can just go with the normal MVC model where you have your models, your views, and the controller basically handles all the logic and the models handle the data. But when you go with this pattern, it's more flexible. You have your contracts, you have your services, you have your repositories, and every model is mapped to a repository. So if there's a change in your Eloquent model, or maybe you have a new model that no longer supports Eloquent, you can still be able to use it because you have a service that allows for robust changes. So the next thing, aside from using the repository pattern, if you want to build a robust API, is that you must use versioning. You must use versioning. Always make sure you use versioning. It's very important. So normally when you go to consume some API, you see that, okay, there's a documentation for version 1, there's a documentation for version 2, and until you get to version N. So basically, with versioning, there's an API for each time that you have something totally different from what you have initially. So as you make changes, you have different versions to your API. So it doesn't break. So even if somebody is making use of the older version of your API and there are changes to it, it doesn't affect them. So newer users make use of the newer versions of your API, and old or legacy code are still functioning. So always make sure you use versions. Always make sure you use version. So at the end of this topic, I might just show you a walkthrough of how all of these are interrelated. The next thing, aside from using version when you're building a robust API with Laravel, is that you must always use a JSON resource. So when you send data to the consumer or the client, he expects it to be in JSON. And one key feature of JSON is the camel casing. I've had people bring APIs I'm supposed to use, and you see that it's not camel cased. Sometimes they don't even follow a particular pattern. You see, sometimes it has kebab casing, it has snake casing, it has different casing altogether. But the standard for JSON is that it must be camel cased. So with the resource, the data that you're sending back to the user or the client, you can manipulate it and alter it in such a way that it is what the user wants. So with these resources, JSON resources, you can do that and structure the data in such a way that the user gets it exactly the way that he wants. It makes life simpler for him. They know that, okay, the convention that this person uses is the camel casing. It just makes life simple. And the next thing is that you should always use boot methods. If you want to build a robust API with Laravel, please make use of boot methods. A lot of times you're going to have some changes in the model level of your application. There's no need writing this logic in the controller. Sometimes you can write it in the model. Okay, a model is deleted, what should happen? A model is updated, what should happen? A model is truncated, what should happen? So there are different booted methods. We have the deleted, we have the updated, and we have the created. I, for one, I prefer that most of these logics are kept in the booted method. So as you can see in the screen here, I have the deleted boot method. So whenever a document is deleted, this particular method handles deleting of the file. So I don't have to do that in the controller level. And if I have different functions that call this particular deleting method, I don't have to do that each time I call them. I just keep it at the boot level. And each time this happens, it just deletes it. So using boot methods is very important, and it makes your life simpler, and it makes your code way, way faster. So the next thing is that after you use boot method, you should take advantage of eloquent. Use relationships. Always make use of relationships. With relationships, you can never go wrong. Relationships allow you to do a lot of things. So always make use of relationships. They are very important. I've seen people that build APIs like they code in Laravel. They don't make use of relationships. It's not good. If you make use of relationships, you can make use of other functionalities that comes with using relationships. There are lots of them. There's the sync, there's the detach. And once you make use of good relationships and your data structure is well handled, it just makes everything simpler and easier for you. So whenever I'm teaching people, I tell them, make use of eloquent, make use of relationships. They make your code easier to read, and they also make it better. You organize it very well. The next thing is that you should make use of migrations. Make use of migration. Some people prefer to edit the code in the database. Like you want to create a table, you go there, create a new table, impute all the data. Then you're migrating to a cloud service and you have to run a migration or you have to run a CIDR. Then you don't have this. You want to now export the database and import it. All of those are long processes. Once you make use of migrations, it makes your life easy. You just run your migration and all your database is there. It's like the equivalent of doing a version control for your database. You have everything that you've ever worked on. The changes you made, all of it is there. So I always encourage people to make sure they use migrations. Migrations make your life simple and fast. Another thing is to make sure you use CDAS. When you make use of CDAS, testing becomes simpler. You populate the data that you know, okay, this data will always be there. So you have them in your CDAS, you run your migrations, you run your CDAS. You're always good to go. Your data is always there. You have your CDAS and you have the data inside of them. So no matter what happens to your database, you always have a backup. The CDAS, the migrations, they serve as a backup. You can never go wrong with them. Once you have an issue, you rerun your migration, your CDAS. They are there. Though it's not, I don't know, it's not like the best advantage to having a backup though, but it's good to always have CDAS and migrations. Another thing you should always implement is soft delete. Hard delete is not effective. With soft delete, you can always have your data. You can always have your data. When you implement hard delete, you delete data, it is gone forever. But with soft delete, you always have your data. If there's any issue, you always have something to fall back to. Always implement soft delete. Another thing is an activity log. So you're building an API that does a particular functionality. It's always advisable that you make use of an activity log. So you want to know what's happening on the system at all times. So with an activity log, a user is created, you create an activity log for that. A user logs in, he logs out, he deletes a file, you create an activity log, and it goes a long way that, okay, the admin of the system wants to know what's been happening in the system. You can easily bring up the activity log and he can see everything that has been happening in the system. They are very important. I always advise people, make an activity log for your system. Let every coming in and going out be recorded. So you always have data to know what's actually happening in the system. Though the activity log is not a backup for an error log, but always have an activity log. So it tells you, okay, what was happening when this happened. So you just know what was happening. The next thing is that you should make use of job queues. Make use of job queues. You don't want everything to be running at once. With job queues, you can queue activities and they can run. You can have an activity that, okay, this one will take a lot of time to process. You can queue it and let those that have a shorter processing time run faster, and they run faster. With queues, you can have this asynchronous effect that you make tasks that are faster run first, while those that are slower or consume more resources run later when the resources are available. So with that, your code tends to run faster. So always make use of job queues. Another thing is that you should run tests. You don't just build an API and you don't run tests. So you should always run tests. It's very important that you run tests. You run tests. So finally, the next thing is that you should publish your API. I know there are some persons that have requested APIs from, and they just sent me a JSON file. Always make sure that you publish the API, you send a link, and somebody can access the API from anywhere. It's very simple and straightforward. I've requested for APIs and people give me JSON files. You have to import the JSON file into your Postman or Swagger or whatever you use. You export it. Most of the time when you export it, it generates a link and those links are shareable and you can just give it to the person. Then another thing is that you should always use external storage. You should always use external storage. There's the AWS buckets. Laravel supports it. It also supports Cloudinary, Google Drive. You shouldn't save your files on your server. The more files that you save on your server, the bigger your server size becomes. So make use of this external storage. Save your files in either AWS bucket, Cloudinary, Google Drive. There are other ones. Go with the one that best serves the purpose that you want, but these are the ones that I make use of. Most of the time I use Google Drive. It's free actually, and they give you a shit ton of space on your trial. So make use of them, learn how to use them. Cloudinary is also free too. Like when so make use of this, stop saving files on your own server. They actually make the server to have a lot of files. So then I have the references. So basically that is it. So I don't know if I was told I was supposed to speak for 25 minutes. So I guess that I would have loved to do a demo where I show you how the repository pattern of building with Laravel works. But 5 minutes. So that's it basically. Thank you. Hello.
Okay, yeah, you said you wanted to show us what's the name?
Yes, I thought I was supposed to do this for 25 minutes. If I have more time, I would love to show you how the repository pattern of building with Laravel works.
Please go
Then
on, by all
how to
means.
publish that API from Postman.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Please go on, by all means.
So you can go on. The second speaker, you can go on for the whole 15 minutes. Since the second speaker is there. Yeah.
Okay, there's no problem. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, so I'm just going to go to my VS Code now, and that's where, so this is my Postman basically. So there are other alternatives to the Postman. We have Swagger and we have different ones. So basically I'll be using Postman, and then this is my Visual Studio Code. So basically this is what we'll be using. So for the repository pattern, the entry point is always your routes. So it's always your routes. So
sorry, we're still seeing your slide.
Okay, you're still seeing my slide. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Okay, you can see my VS Code now, right? Hello, Faith.
Yeah, exactly. You can see. I see your VS Code.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so basically what I'll be doing is a walkthrough to show you how the repository pattern works. So normally, they said Laravel is a model view controller. It implements the MVC structure. But most times, due to the robustness of the repository pattern, some Laravel developers, though it's a thing of choice too, but I have come to see it as the best convention. So let's look at it. So this is the API, which is the initial route of getting into your API. So you always have your routes. So this is the part where I talked about versioning. You see this prefix, this group. This is how Laravel handles versioning. You have your prefix, you have your version. So this here is my version 1. If I happen to have another one, I can just copy and paste it on that and change the prefix to version 2. And whenever they're calling that particular endpoint, they also have to attach the version 2 prefix. So whenever a person calls it, it's only these APIs that the person will be hitting. It won't hit any API that is outside this version 1 API. Using prefix is a way of abstracting your code and organizing it. It just makes the code simpler and easier to use. It makes it cleaner. way cleaner. So with prefixes, everything is cleaner and simpler to use. So I will just take this one as the case study. So this is a hospital management system, and then basically you have medication. So it's the medications, you add a medication, you update a medication, and you edit a medication. So this is what these 4 guys, they're what we'll be looking at basically. So how to get the medication, how to add the medication, update the medication, and you delete your medication. So from here, you can see that I'm calling this particular controller. So if we go to this controller, this EMR controller will get to the get patient medications. And from there, we'll see how this is quite different from the standard approach because the system makes use of the repository pattern. So I go to my controller so that I can show you how this works. So basically, this is the controller. You have your controller, and we are looking at the get patient medications. So the first thing you will notice here, normally, most people would decide to handle the processing here inside of the controller. But when you are making use of the repository pattern, you don't handle your logic here. You give the logic to the service to handle, and you give the data logic to the repository to handle. So you call the service. So you have your services, you create your service. You can see they are all called here. I call the services here. And another also of resource allow to transfer the data to what you use. It's very simple. I love it, makes everything simple and easy to use. So if we go to we have this service called the EMR service, and we are calling the get patient. So these services are also stored inside services. See the service that was another thing that see it. You have the different making use of a particular service handles. It's like a high level of abstraction. You have a service for everything, and each of these services is attached to a repository. So you handle what you want to handle here, and let others handle what they will handle. So you just allow it to flow. So we are looking at the medication. So we looked at get patient medication. We have our medication repository. In the repository, passing is my dedicated record. So with this, I have data to my the contract. Or you can bind it with a contract. This is also another means too. It's also a style in the repository pattern. So some developer the repository. So you have a contract for each repository. So if I go to my contracts folder here, you see that I have a contract for my medication. So you can see it. It's more or less like an interface. The contracts are like interfaces where you just have abstract methods. You can see that these are not concrete methods. So it's an interface. So you have these non-concrete methods. They are all here. And you can call the concrete methods from here. So each of these concrete method, each of these non-concrete method rather is attached to a concrete method. So we have this get patient medication, they are attached to the repositories themselves. So we have the medication repository. So just like that, we have this. So we have our get patient medication. You see, it is calling it here, and this will return it. And you get your data that you require. So the next thing is the resources. Like I said earlier, always make use of resources. They make life easy. So for the medication, I'll just show you the resource for that. So this is it. Normally, due to the way my data is structured in my database, if I just sent that data back, it won't be like this. It won't be camel cased. So with my resource, I can structure the data in such a way that when it is called, the user gets it in the standard JSON format. So whenever that resource, this resource called medication resource is called, the user will get it in the standard format. So basically the whole idea is that you have your routes, and from your route, you call your controller, and the controller calls a service, and the service themselves are attached to contracts, which are interfaces, which are implemented by the repositories. So with these repositories, you can now have the models there. So if there's a change in your model, it doesn't affect your repository. So it's like a high level of abstraction. It makes everything very simple and straightforward. So with that, let me show you how versioning is also achieved. So you have your API, then you have your different versioning. Most people would want to put each of them inside the folder. So you have a folder called V1, you have another folder called V2, and those files that are related to version 1 are put inside that particular folder. Most people just go with the prefixes and they are done. So with the prefix, you have a prefix for version 1, and then you call it, they have another prefix for version 2, and then they call it, or some people go with the monolithic aspect. This particular server has the version 1 of the application, but when you're calling another server, it's the version 2 that is stored there. So different servers for different versions of the application. So they don't have to have different versions inside this particular Laravel application. They just clone it, put it in another server, call that version 2, and the code is totally different. So you just go with what works for you. But me, I like the way that I do it. I put it inside of my controllers, create a folder called version 1, have another folder called version 2, and all the controllers that are related to the version 1 of my project are put in that version 1 folder, and all of them extend the base controller. And basically, that is just it. So I will show you how I publish my application. So that's quite important too. So like I said earlier, I've worked with somebody before and I requested that, okay, you built your API. I would like to see it. I would like to interact with the API that you built. And the person sent me a JSON file. And I had to now import the JSON file. And then I don't think that's the right approach to building APIs. I always tell people that I work with, make sure you publish your API and you send me the link. So whenever you make new changes, you don't have to send me a JSON file again. All your changes will reflect on the link, and all I have to do is to refresh the page and I see the new changes. So basically, if you're using Postman, this is how you publish your API. You right click on it, you go to view documentation, and you just look at it, or everything is just there for you. Everything is already there for you. You go through it, and on the right side of the screen, you see the publish button. If you click it, it gets published to the internet. And then a link is created for you. And with that link, you can send it to the person. And that's just it, basically.
All right. Thank you very much. So, okay. Thanks so much for your presentation. I'm sure we all learned something about APIs, as in also so much wealth of knowledge over there. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
So grateful. Thank you so much. So in case you have any questions, kindly drop them in the chat section so that we could take questions after the short presentation from PMO Dev Center. Over to you, sir. Tolu, over to you. You're muted.
So are you done with your laptop?
Yeah, we're done.
Can I send the video to you so you play it? Because
Yes.
I'm not done, man.
So what did you say?
So I'll send the video to you now so you play it. So
Okay. Okay. Okay, while we're waiting, does anyone have any question? Anybody, do you have any question from what has been talked about so far? Probably about the versioning, what you the repository part. Although, like, there's some stuff that looked very, 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 experts in, like they look very, very, very hysteric. I was like, oh wow, I need to study a lot to get to this level. But it was all explanatory using the dependency injection version. Like, so, in case anyone has any question. Okay. I take it that there are no questions. No questions. All right. So quickly, I'm going to play video. Because this event is sponsored by Bincom Dev Center. So I'm going to play a video and just give me a minute while I share my screen for it to load.
Hello, my name is Olayinka Simoya. I am the Professional Services Lead at Bincom Dev Center. Bincom Dev Center is a multi-location tech training and development center in Nigeria, and our major objective at Bincom Dev Center is to produce over 1,000 quality tech individuals every year. These people are highly employable, globally attractive, and highly sought after in the tech ecosystem. You ask why, right? Yes, tech talents are in high demand in international communities such as the US, the UK, Canada, and France. These countries have made policies and pathways to enable immigrations for tech talents. And guess what? Average salaries of software developers are as high as £35,000 per annum, and this is at the entry level. The opportunity for tech talents are endless, both locally and internationally. This means that the tech ecosystem is one of the highest employers of labor in Nigeria. Yet, many tech companies say that they are not able to find the right tech talents that they need. This is why we started the Bincom Global Tech Program. The program focuses on 3 major pillars, which are learn skills, gain experience, and gain exposure. The program spans between 1 to 2 years, and during this period, trainees are taken through an in-depth curriculum in their chosen tech tracks and also in development of soft skills required for them to become globally attractive in the tech ecosystem, both locally and internationally. This program helps trainees to learn tech skills, gain relevant tech experience, and also exposure to the endless possibilities and opportunities available in the tech ecosystem all over the world. Listen to some of the testimonials of our past trainees.
Yes, I had high hopes and expectations while joining Bincom Academy, and trust me, believe you me, yes, it was met beyond my expectations. I saw things I have never seen. I did things I thought I would not be able to do in the space of 1 to 3 years. I achieved so much.
Actually, my expectation was met. Being at Dev Center, being my situation. I learned quite a lot of things. I learned web development, front-end development. I learned mobile development. Coming here, I was thinking I would just I enrolled as a front-end a mobile app development team, but later on actually lead my hand on some project of front-end teams, lead my hand on front-end development like WordPress, like Joomla, also work with some nice front-end frameworks like Angular and the likes.
The program has various knowledge tracks that you can choose from. Some of the technical knowledge tracks include the data science track, which is starting with Python. We have the backend track starting with PHP, the front-end mobile app track starting with JavaScript, the DevOps infrastructure track. We have the UI UX graphics track, and also the software testing and quality assurance track. And apart from the technical and software programming knowledge tracks, we also have business knowledge tracks that are equally highly paid across the world. And some of them include the project, service, and product management track starting with Agile. We have the digital marketing, performance marketing track as well. That's interesting, right? Yes. This is a highly intensive program. You need to be able to commit at least 40 hours every week to the program. You can choose from our various shifts. We have the regular shift, which is the 40 hours weekly, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays and 1 to 2 Saturdays a month. We have the night shift, the 40 hours weekly, which is 5 p.m. till late on weekdays and 1 to 2 Saturdays every month. We also have the majorly weekend shift, which is 40 hours weekly, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Saturdays and Sundays, and then 4 hours every other weekdays. We also have other flexible shifts based on your availability. Yes, all you need to start are a laptop device and a passion and a hunger for IT. But wait, it gets better. We have various financing options to help you cover the cost of the program. Though the program is not free, you do not need to have money to be able to apply and be admitted to this program. The total cost of the Bincom Global Tech program over the 1 to 2 years period is 1.2 million naira. And we have one of the financing options available is the income sharing agreement, which means that the company will sponsor you through the entire program and you only start paying when you start earning income after the program. This means that aside the skills, the experience, and the exposure, the company is also willing to invest their money on you. It doesn't get better than that. What are you waiting for? Hurry up to bincom.net/globaltech and register to launch your global tech career. Thank you.
With digital
Thank you for joining today's community. It's like Fridays. Sometimes on Saturdays, our high stake career talk. So we want you to join the next one. Thank you for joining us again. And the speaker, thank you for speaking.